You've survived another week. Thank you for listening, downloading, and supporting the Black Man with a Gun show. This week, the magic word is responsibility. Children and guns. Whose responsibility is it? Michael interviews April Cayce, talking about PTSD and a program that she's involved with to help the law enforcement, emergency response people, and veterans who suffer from PTSD. And attorney Andrew Branca is back with his Law of Self-Defense tip of the week. This whole thing with children and guns really got me jazzed. So there's a bit of a rant in here, but I'm hoping that you forgive me in advance. This, believe it or not, is episode number 565.
BlackManWithAGun.com, Ken Blanchard's Pro-Gun Podcast.
If you're a long-time listener of this program, you know that I care about our community, I care about our country, and I care about you. That's what kind of makes me strange. I'm actually the pastor of Pistoleros, Paladins, and Patriots. I actually care about your welfare. I actually sometimes grieve over the stuff that I hear on the news. And right now, I'm a little bummed out at the way parents are letting kids just take over. It's the Lord of the Flies, or worse. If you're new to the show, welcome, and thank you for joining me. You're going to get the concerned old guy on this one. But I'm hoping is if you are a new gun owner, that you will hear the words that I'm about to say, and you take heed to some of my suggestions and my recommendations, that you will understand that I'm doing it out of love, that I want you to make sure that you protect your family, keep them safe, and then help us stop the madness of the lies that are perpetrated on the news and in common conversation. You'll see what I'm talking about after John Wayne leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I got a brief comment about some of the parents that I hear and see in my neighborhood and around the town. Some of those who respond on Facebook and some of those who make comments on Twitter, especially those adults that I hear talk about families and home life at work. All of it makes me appreciate all those old guys that are around when my parents were around. I want to tip my hat to those successful baby boomers that are now the gray-haired group in their 70s. This is a generation that survived the civil rights era, busing, political upheavals, World War II, the Nazi Holocaust, fear of the H-bomb, Korea, Vietnam, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Watergate, and have raised children that have invented the internet, social media, drones, video games, remote control vehicles, cell phones, and all the stuff that we take for granted and that the millennials seemingly can't live without. I guess this is truly a rant, but somehow, unfortunately, my generation has forgotten that being a parent is a full-time job. We collectively, hopefully not you, my friend, have not learned some important things from the old folks. Are you with me? The first lesson is that love is sacrificial. True love, real love, is not an emotion. It's not a passing feeling or equal to what they say today, I heart you. Love is expressed more than it is said in my parents' generations. Who remembers the Encyclopedia Britannica, the World Book, and maybe even the Bible story series of books our parents invested in so we might have a chance to go to college or get good grades, so we could at least get a job and get out on our own? Remember that? Those books were our Google. Remember the dictionary, the real big red one? My parents worked 2 jobs so that we had a house. They rented, clothes to wear, and expensive breakfast cereal to eat on Saturday mornings. Name brand cereal too, like Cap'n Crunch, Sugar Pops, and Rice Krispies. They made payments on that encyclopedia. When someone got a new car in the neighborhood or a family, it was a big deal back then. Folks would celebrate with you. Oh, and by the way, there were guns and live ammunition in the house. They were real military arms brought home from the wars they served in or brought and bought at pawn shops to protect the home. My maternal grandmother, mother of the church, deaconess, preparer of Holy Communion on second Sundays, Kept a loaded, single-barreled Sears and Roebuck shotgun behind the kitchen wood stove all my life. Nobody touched it. Nobody died from it being there, unsecured and loaded. My paternal grandmother was a little rough around the edges. She kept a loaded Belgium Browning A5 shotgun in her bedroom, over the door, and actually a concealed weapon, an Italian-handled switchblade knife, in her bra. Grandma Lou was rough. But that's for another story. Loaded guns, oh yeah. Then there was my stepfather's family in Spotsylvania, Virginia. They were avid hunters and gun owners. They competed in turkey shoots around Christmas time. They hunted on private lands because it was safer. They hunted, they ate raccoon, possum, groundhog, squirrels, white-tailed deer, and muskrat even. They kept rifles and shotguns in the hallways of their homes. The pistols you didn't see. They were hidden but shared whenever the men gathered in the garage to talk football, baseball, or boxing. I couldn't wait till I was old enough to be let in on that group where they cussed, smoked, and drank alcohol. Lots of alcohol. Was the greatest generation any different from us? They might have ate better, but I don't think not really. All the negatives of humanity still existed back then. They smoked, they drank excessively. It was culturally acceptable, like being gay is now. They were racist, they were homophobic, and everything in between, but one of the key things I remember that is different is responsibility. Most adults accepted their responsibility. What is responsibility? The state or fact of being accountable or to blame for something. The ones that didn't accept their responsibility walked away from it. Papa was a Rolling Stone. Luckily, more stayed and ran away, so we survived as a people. What helped us is that there were enough surrogates that took up the slack for those who couldn't handle it. Someone protected us. Someone fed us. Someone was there for you. We as kids did not raise ourselves. We respected authority. We respected ourselves. We respected adults. We understood that sometimes you had to wait until your mother or your father came home. Sometimes you had to wait until you were old enough, tall enough, or strong enough. Our parents and adults said no to us. And no worked. Do you know that you can delegate authority but not responsibility? I actually learned that in the Marine Corps. Like when your big sister could pick you up from school, but it was still your parents' responsibility for your welfare. Today we have kids assaulting adults and playing the knockout game. Today we have kids calling protective services on their parents for disciplining them. Today we have kids telling their parents what to do. Today we have kids joining criminal gang empires. Today we have kids prostituting other kids. Today we have kids raping other kids. Kids selling dope. And kids killing other kids in schools. But we're blaming the gun. What the hell is going on with these parents? If you love your children, then you sacrifice your time, your career, your TV shows to teach them, to train them, to explain to them the truths of life. A child that grows up alone is raised by YouTube, The Real, the Cartoon Network, or some horribly but popular reality TV show that is not real. And for the record, I can't stand all the fake protesting going on for every damn thing. The kids who want to be civil rights heroes, really bad. They're not. They're not even close. That whole Starbucks protest is so asinine. How about protesting gang violence and the murders in Chicago? How about protesting opium addiction, vaping, and smoking potpourri? How about protesting our lack of protection of women, the murder of women? How about protesting the sex trade, sexual slavery, or something real for that matter? Parents just need to be parents again. We as free-thinking, honest people need to correct, need to say the truth as much as we can, need to work on our delivery, our presentation skills. You know that guns don't murder. There is no such thing as gun violence. It's just violence. It's our responsibility to educate our children, to love our families again, to protect our family, and to save our family. I grew up in a household of hard-working, blue-collar people. Mixed in there was some hustlers and hunters that partied like it was New Year's Eve every Friday and Saturday night. And nobody touched the gun that was in the house. and it was and is never the gun. I know it's hard to counter the repeated lies about gun control, assault weapons, and the AR-15 to a growing group of people that take no responsibility for anything. But please try. You don't drown if you fall in water. You only drown if you stay there. Thanks for listening.
This portion of the show is sponsored by CrossbreedHolsters.com. Crossbreed Holsters has gained national recognition as a maker of the best and most functional concealment holsters available on the market today. Each holster is handcrafted to ensure your firearm is safe and secure while carrying, combined with the best customer service in the industry. Visit CrossbreedHolsters.com.
Big Mike, you're up next, brother.
Thank you, Ken, and welcome to another Tips and Review segment. I am Michael Woodland, and today we're going to discuss seeking help with PTSD. There is a misguided myth that only soldiers returning from war suffer from PTSD. Well, that is not the case, and we, as a society, should be a little more acceptable to this condition. Are we aware of the signs? Do you know how to deal with those who have it? While at the USCCA convention, I met a unique individual named April Cayce who took the time to talk with me in regards to PTSD. April, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how Rebound 911 started and what's it about?
Sure. So I've been in and out of law enforcement for 22 years. Worked for St. Louis City Police Department and Kansas City Police Department. And over that 22 years, obviously I've seen this job take a toll, not only on myself, but my comrades as well. And I noticed it not just in those who were, former military coming into law enforcement, even with those that had not, but the job itself, just along with life, tends to, kind of sometimes make things difficult for people, and people aren't really sure how to handle their emotions or how to handle when things aren't going right. As I'm sure some, awareness has been brought to it that suicide rates among first responders is extremely high. As of 2018, we average about 1 every 72 hours, which is, a tragedy in itself. So with that being said, I just started seeing a lot of my comrades start to suffer in silence, where it was affecting their families, affecting the way they do their jobs, just affecting the community as a whole. Because these individuals are mothers, fathers, uncles, mentors, coaches. They're not just, police officers or firefighters or EMTs. They do have a life outside their occupation, but the situation was affecting all aspects of their life. And I realized that there really weren't a lot of resources out there. And, with the stigma of mental, wellness and all of that, people felt like, they weren't in a place to be able to reach out and ask for help, because that wasn't being a man, or that wasn't being a woman, or that wasn't falling within the lines of the image of what a police officer or even military person is supposed to be. We're supposed to be tough and rough and take it and, move on and not handle our emotions. So, after, like with everyone else, after your cup gets full and it begins to spilleth over, that's when you start to see the fallout of not addressing this issue. So I finally, in 2016, I had 2 of my friends who were police officers commit suicide. And so I decided that's it. I have to do something. So hence with that, Rebound 911 was born.
Well, with what you provide, is it only for the affected individual, or does it extend to immediate family members as well?
It extends to family as well, whether they're married, have girlfriend, boyfriends, engaged, parents, even siblings. And we are working on adding in for their children as well, whether they're, adult children or minor children, because again, this occupation or, occupations rather affects them on all aspects, whether it's their shift they're working, whether it's the type of detail that they, a unit they're assigned to. It just affects a lot of things, and people don't realize the effect that this occupation will have, like military. If you don't come from a military background or paramilitary background, sometimes you don't realize the lifestyle changes that will actually happen. And that begins to cause some issues because people aren't, really well, understanding of what this really means. once the glow of the occupation, oh, my husband or wife is, military or law enforcement or fire, whatever, when the true reality of the world sets in, people are kind of taken by storm. And sometimes, depending on the individual and how strong, their relationship is and how strong their faith is, it can sometimes not, turn out so well.
That's true. So now, have you ever had a situation when you had an encounter with somebody and you actually detected that this person probably had the symptoms of PTSD?
Yes. Usually, when you're talking to people, you'll start to kind of notice, how they're sort of distrusting. Sometimes you'll just notice the way their verbiage of, you can tell that they're not exactly their joyous self, particularly if you've known this person in the past, to be smiling, to be, engaged with not only their families, but the community. You'll start to see them withdraw. You'll start to see they don't want to, even for simple things, even for their own children, birthday parties or different things, they kind of start isolating themselves, or they may seem edgy all the time, or they may be tired all the time. So you'll see different symptoms of things, or, they may be, their aggression levels may, things that normally wouldn't bother them in the past. Now, all of a sudden, they're lashing out at people over the simplest things. So you'll kind of start to notice the behavior changes. Now, to say someone has PTSD, yes, they need to be evaluated in an actual diagnosis. Evaluation process needs to happen, because just someone shows some signs of PTSD does not mean that they have PTSD. They could have PTSI, or they could have anxiety, they could have depression, they could have a host of other diagnoses. So to classify someone as having PTSD, there really truly needs to be an evaluation done, by a professional.
Can you tell me what PTSI is?
PTSI is post-traumatic injury, which means they are showing some of the signs. They don't fully meet the criteria to be diagnosed as PTSD. So they're kind of on their way. But at that point, if early intervention happens, they can generally sort of stop the process from them potentially going full-fledged to PTSD.
Oh, okay. So what do you suggest someone who has PTSD, who is ashamed to come forward to get help, what should they do until they actually seek out the help?
I mean, there's tons of resources out there. What I say is that when your life has begun to be affected to the point where you know for yourself that you're not who you used to be, people know. It's just like if you have a cold, if you're not well, right? So part of it is, once you have admitted to yourself, okay, I'm not. When I look in the mirror, I don't see I don't see me. I see someone else's now. This is not who I am. I'm not the jolly person I used to be, or I'm not the patient person I used to be. So when it gets to the point where you know that your life is, whether it be your home life, work life, is being affected by what's kind of going on, or you're not even sure what's going on, but you know that you're just not feeling yourself, it is okay to not be okay. The point of it is okay, now it's time for me to go and get some assistance. And you can use counselors, you can use chaplains, you can use different people who specialize in PTSD or who specialize in dealing with mental wellness. And it doesn't mean you're going to automatically, be put on medication. It doesn't mean that you're going to be labeled. It doesn't mean, what it does mean is that you've acknowledged the fact that I need help and I don't know how to deal with this and I need some assistance. So that's where, I encourage people that don't be ashamed. Everybody has their time. Everybody has their days where they're not feeling well. But if those days go past more than 30, then it's probably time past 30 days, or you begin to see, even notice in yourself, I'm just yelling at people for no reason, or I seem to be agitated every day, all day. Then it's time to go and say, okay, look, I need some help. And there's plenty of numbers. If you're a veteran, there's definitely resources out there for veterans. Whether you're a police officer, firefighter, EMT, Department of Corrections, even, 911 dispatchers, because those are also kind of not, are retirees, because a lot of times we forget about our retirees, because sometimes the symptoms of PTSD do not appear until they come out of the job, till they retire. That's part of what we do, is to help them find the closest and most effective resource for them within their area where they're located. And it may be simple things of like just going to counseling. It could be simple things of dealing with self-care. It could be simple things of, just really figuring out what the root cause of where these emotions are coming from and getting those addressed. And you now have new coping skills and coping mechanisms to where now you're fine. it doesn't mean you're going to be on medication for the rest of your life or have to go to counseling the rest of your life. It just really depends on each individual. But the sooner that you get some assistance with it, the faster you will begin to return back to a level of new normalcy for you, because sometimes people realize you'll never return back sometimes to who you were. But the point is to get you to your new normal so that you're now living the best quality of life that you and your family can live.
Okay, well, that's pretty impactful right there. Now, if anybody wanted to come volunteer to assist in your cause, can they?
Yes, I have different levels of volunteers. I have those who are either current, active, or former in whatever their occupation was, whether it's military or first responder. I have some who we have peer supports. If you need someone to talk to, or you're like, look, I'm not sure what to do, we do have that ability. I have people who volunteer for that. And then, I have some who volunteer to help, with events. I have some who volunteer to additionally help find new resources and new partners that we can work with. I have some who volunteer to help put on events. So we definitely need and accept volunteers, because at this point we're all volunteers on this organization. No one gets paid, so everyone at this point is doing this from the heart, because either they've been affected, or they know a family member who's been affected, or a friend, and they want to do something to help change the trajectory that we're on right now.
Okay. What's your social media so people can contact you if they have any further questions or want to set up something where they want to do an event with you?
We are on Facebook under Rebound 911. We're also on Twitter and Instagram.
Under the same name?
Under the same name, yes. Pretty easy.
All right. Well, I do thank you for your time, and I'm going to reach back out to you in about 4 to 5 months and see where you are and let the people know your progress, and maybe somebody that's listening can reach out and help you out some more.
That would be awesome. Yes, we are definitely always looking for people who would wish to help out, or if someone's listening that needs some assistance, please don't hesitate to call. We will do in and everything we can to help you as quickly as we can, so that you can get back to living the best quality of life that you are entitled to live.
That's what it is. So once again, what's your social media?
Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
There we go. We got it. All right.
All right. Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it. Have a great day.
Hey, you too. I challenge everyone to reach out to Rebound 911 and let's tackle this issue and actually start making the lives of those who are affected by PTSD manageable and enjoyable. For those who are looking to contact me, visit blackmanwiththegun.com and under the About tab, click on my name, Michael Woodland, and shoot me an email or a phone call. Please leave a voicemail or text message, and I promise I will get back to you. Until next week, keep shooting, keep practicing, and have fun. Back to you, Ken.
If you carry a gun for self-defense, be smarter and join the United States Concealed Carry Association so you can be covered in case you have to use the thing to protect your life from the judicial system. Upfront bail bond funding, attorney counseling, personal hardship coverage, membership deals and discounts, firearms theft, liability coverage, and more. Go to uscca.blackmanwiththegun.com right now. uscca.blackmanwiththegun.com. And Andrew, you're up next, sir.
Thanks, Ken, for having me back on for another Law of Self-Defense Case of the Week. I'm attorney Andrew Branca with lawofselfdefense.com. This Case of the Week is provided for educational purposes only. This week's case is State v. Lau in a decision handed down by the Montana Supreme Court on April 17, 2018. It involves the element of proportionality in a self-defense claim. Specifically, whether a defendant's use of a pistol caliber carbine to defend against a thrown punch was a reasonable use of defensive force. As usual with appellate use of force decisions, at the core of this case we have a great deal of human dysfunction and poor judgment. In particular, we have a defendant, Lau, who decides to intervene in a domestic dispute between a live-in couple under circumstances in which the boyfriend of that couple, the eventual victim in this case, had reason to suspect that the defendant had a romantic interest in his girlfriend. On the day in question, the boyfriend and girlfriend were running errands using the boyfriend, the victim's pickup truck, and apparently the keys to the truck were lost. The girlfriend called the defendant, Lau, to pick her up and drive her home so she could retrieve a spare key, and the defendant did so. Shortly thereafter, the victim, the boyfriend, also arrived at the home where, remember, he lived with the girlfriend, and an altercation ensued between the defendant and the victim. The defendant called 911 and ended up on the front porch locked out of the home. Did the defendant wait for the police to show up? Nope. The defendant retrieved a 9mm carbine and re-entered the home through a back door, and the altercation with the victim continued. The defendant fired one shot into the floor as a warning shot, was punched in the face by the victim, and then shot the victim fatally in the neck. The defendant was charged with deliberate homicide, and at trial argued self-defense. As we should all know by now, a claim of self-defense requires particular legal elements in order to be valid, and one of those elements is proportionality. The degree of defensive force used must be proportional to the degree of the attacking force. If the defensive force is disproportionately greater, the element of proportionality is lost in the self-defense claim, and the claim of self-defense collapses. Obviously, the defendant's gunshot to the victim's neck constituted deadly force. The legal question on self-defense, then, on this element of proportionality, is whether this deadly force by the defendant was proportional to the force threatened by the victim, that is, the punch to the defendant's face. During closing arguments, the prosecution said the following to the jury, quote, "If someone's going to punch you in Montana, you can't shoot him. Life's too valuable. Unless you had reason to believe, and you believe, genuinely believe, that's a reasonable belief, and we talked about this, that they would cause serious bodily injury. And you have an instruction on serious bodily injury that you're not going to walk away from. You could have broken bones, death, long-term impairment. If you reasonably believe someone is going to cause that type of harm to you, you can shoot them, but you can't shoot them if they punch you." The defendant's lawyer contested this representation of the law in their own closing statement to the jury, especially the prosecutor's claim that a punch would constitute a threat of serious bodily injury only if, quote, "you're not going to walk away from it," close quote. In particular, the defendant noted that a blow to the head could cause a potentially fatal closed head injury from which a victim might, quote unquote, walk away, only to die some hours later. The defendant also referenced to the jury several cases in which a single punch had, in fact, caused serious bodily injury. The jury ultimately convicted the defendant of the charge of deliberate homicide, and the trial court sentenced the defendant to 52 years in the Montana State Prison. The defendant appealed his conviction on the basis that the prosecution misrepresented Montana law on whether a punch represented a deadly force threat against which a firearm could be used in proportional defense. In essence, the argument being made by the defendant is that because a thrown punch can potentially result in serious bodily harm or death, it ought to be considered deadly force simply as a matter of law. I know from the frequency with which this issue comes up in my classes that this is a common belief, or at least a desired belief. Normal, law-abiding folks don't want to be punched, naturally, and they'd like the law to allow them to use deadly defensive force, to wit, their concealed carry pistol, against a punch on the grounds that a punch has the potential to cause death or grave bodily injury. But that's not what the law allows, for the simple reason that the vast majority of punches do not result in death or grave bodily injury, and the courts are unwilling to treat every casual thrown punch as a deadly force threat that can be countered with shots fired. Now, the courts do recognize that there are circumstances in which a barehanded attack can constitute a deadly force attack against which deadly force can be used, but only in exceptional cases where there's some aggravating circumstances to differentiate that barehanded attack from the norm. For example, if a bare-handed attacker is much larger or stronger or has some exceptional fighting ability relative to the defender, or the beating is of a sustained nature, or as in the case of the George Zimmerman trial, where the bare hands are being used to smash a victim's head repeatedly into a sidewalk. But all of that is a factual question that must be determined by a jury, depending on the particular circumstances of the case. In this case, the jury apparently decided that the victim's thrown punch did not constitute a deadly force threat. They accordingly discarded the defendant's claim as self-defense based on the loss of the element of proportionality in that self-defense claim, and they found the defendant guilty of the homicide charge. The bottom line is that deadly defensive force can be used only to neutralize a deadly force attack, and a thrown punch will not be automatically deemed a deadly force attack as a matter of law simply because it has the potential to be such. A defender who wants to use deadly defensive force to counter the threat of a thrown punch had better be prepared to show the particular unusual circumstances that made that specific punch a deadly force threat. In this particular case, the Montana Supreme Court heard the appeal, noted that the jury had been given essentially correct jury instructions on this issue of proportionality. They had evaluated the evidence presented to them, and they had arrived at a verdict consistent with the law and evidence. The Montana Supreme Court unanimously decided they were not going to second-guess the jury, and they affirmed the defendant's conviction and 52-year sentence. If you enjoy this content, I invite you to join us for the Law of Self-Defense live show every Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern. It's totally free to either participate live or to watch the recording after each show. For more information, point your browser to lawofselfdefense.com/show. Remember, you carry a gun so you're hard to kill. Know the law so you're hard to convict. I'm attorney Andrew Branca for lawofselfdefense.com.
But can I be real with you right now? Gun violence itself is a misnomer. Just like being a little pregnant, the word indicates that if we rid ourselves of the mechanical devices called guns, life would be perfect. There are no quick fixes when it comes to human beings. The answer to saving our children from self-destruction and antisocial behavior is a combination of three things. They cannot be done in isolation, but must be done in concert with one another to work. Children need their parents to be more involved in their lives. Plain and simple. For many people, this is a sacrifice they're not willing to undertake. The result is the increase in the number of children in the court system. We have sacrificed them for better living and allowed strangers to television and other entertainment to rear them. A dog, in comparison, that has been tied up and isolated is not very social either. It's territorial, hostile, and unpredictable. Humans, left alone, become soulless monsters that shoot in playgrounds and school classrooms. But these are somebody's children. And we have done it to ourselves. If everyone could just take care of one child, preferably their own, we wouldn't have so many problems. We are so worried about fixing the world that we're letting our homes go to hell. This problem has nothing to do with the government. The people who help our community don't run for offices. You know them. They are the strong sisters and brothers who care about their kids. They are those who know where their children are at 1 o'clock in the morning. The second piece of the puzzle is education. Truth. Without knowing the facts, adults contribute to the mayhem. If you knew that assault weapons account for less than 1% of the crime in the United States, you would not fall for the argument that legislation is a fix for the problem. You would demand more education, enforcement of the thousands of laws already on the books, and take an active part in your child's education. If a person were educated on the facts, it would be apparent that having a firearm in the home does not seduce a sane person into committing suicide. A person thinking of suicide has internal problems that the gun has nothing to do with. In this day and age, we have Google and Bing and Yahoo and a lot of search engines and a lot of things that you can find information out, YouTube even. How can you still be ignorant about firearms? There is no excuse unless you're willfully ignorant. Education was a sought-after element of my African ancestors in overcoming the legacy of institutionalized slavery in the United States. All my elders wanted for us was to become educated. Education is not only in academia. You must learn how to survive day-to-day living. Somewhere in our quest for civilization, we forgot to keep it simple. Firearms education should be as common as education for fire prevention, poison prevention, and automobile safety. Knowledge alone is not power. It's what you do with your knowledge that empowers. Some people fear that by educating children about firearm safety, hunting, and marksmanship, they will become killers. I strongly disagree. If that was so, then learning about human reproduction and playing with dolls will encourage teenage pregnancy. Should we ban the dolls? Of course not. Education rules. Adults and children, parents and teachers should learn about firearms as if your life depended on it. You see, children, little kids, learn that the numbers 9, 45, and 22 are the names of handgun calibers long before they learn that these same numbers are called Arabic numerals. Children do not grow up in a fear of firearms. They will not do the safe thing without instruction. In the inner city and in your neighborhoods, the chance is high that your child may find a discarded handgun or be able to obtain one on the black market. You have the responsibility to teach your child about guns before they learn about them through tragedy. The teens in your house probably know where your firearm is secretly kept. And these are the guns that are showing up in the classrooms, on the playgrounds, and on the street. Owning a firearm is a great responsibility. You need to learn how to secure what you have. You need to have training on what you have. Just owning a gun is not enough. It's just one step out of many. As a parent, do not try to underestimate your child's curiosity. It is only through education and closer involvement with your children that we are able to save them. Education has always been the instrument of survival for all people. Silence from parents is genocide. The child that grows up in a nurturing home is more responsible and respectful around all firearms. And finally, the third element required to complete the process and stop the death of innocent people is a belief system. For my family, it is a belief in the Creator and His resurrected Son, Jesus. What do your kids believe in? In what do they put their faith? The street hustler believes in the same theories as the corporate raider. To the hustler, there is no right or wrong, no morals or ethics. Their belief is just don't get caught. The kids on the street want what adults want. They want wealth, power, and status. They weigh the risk of each crime as a chairman of the board with a legal merger minus the maturity. These are the hopeless children who have made a frontier out of the streets that you walk in. They have lost all respect for their elders because their elders have lost respect for each other, and they will kill for honor just as feudal societies did in days gone by. Supporters of gun control can quote all the statistics they want from other countries. I can share some with you right now. There is a really popular myth that 13 children are killed each day by guns. The fact is, the adults are also included. The statistic includes children, and I put that in quotes, up to age 19 or 24, depending on the source. Since most violent crime is committed by males aged 16 to 24, the 13 children number includes adult gang members dying during criminal activity. The proper definition of, quote, child is a person between birth and puberty, typically 13 to 14 years old, and in 2013, only one child was killed on the average of day nationwide, or about 0.02 children per state per day. The loss of any child is horrendous. It's terrible. It's despicable. It's just wrong. But it's also wrong to lie. 1,446 children die per year in transportation accidents. Parental neglect and abuse account for 80% of all child deaths, 1,274, which dwarfs gun deaths. 1,917 children die each day from malaria around the world, and 15 men, women, and children per day are murdered by a convicted felon in government-supervised parole probation programs in the U.S. All the protests and midnight vigils in the world don't mean a damn thing either if we cannot be living examples to our children. If you want to save the children, be a parent. Nobody can fix it but us. If you choose to own a firearm or two, do the right thing and involve your family in a safety program. Don't take shortcuts to your safety. Find a real trainer and get formalized training. Talk to your children about guns and violence. Explain that guns are not toys. Tell your kids that if they see a gun in a friend's house, they should stay away from it and inform you about it immediately. Despite what you think about the National Rifle Association, the Eddie Eagle program is a winner. It deals precisely with this issue for young children. In closing, I want to leave you with 3 of my own tips to get after you get training in safe firearms handling to make your home safer. As a parent, number 1, get to know the parents of your children's friends. The more you know, the easier it is to spot potential danger away from home. 2, encourage and be part of your local school's efforts to develop a violence education program that includes information about gun safety, as well as conflict resolution. Number 3, monitor what your kids watch on TV and in the movies and the games they play. Young kids aren't able to distinguish between what looks like reality on screen and real life. Remember, you are your child's primary role model. You can delegate authority, but you cannot delegate your responsibility. Have you heard my other podcast? Speak Life. Proverbs 18:21 says that life and death are in the power of the tongue. Join me in faith and be a part of my family on a podcast that gives you what you missed in church. SpeakLifePodcast.com. Serving Jesus without boundaries. SpeakLifePodcast.com. And we're on Facebook too. SpeakLifePodcast.com. All right, that's it for this week. And I guess I did come off a little preachy on this episode, but I am a preacher and I actually care about you. The reason that I talk in this way is because life is important. You are important. You matter. Your voice matters. Your freedom matters. We are yet at another crucial part in our history as a country where we have the ability to give away the freedoms that have been fought, bled, and died for. George Washington Carver said that 99% of all failures come from people who have a habit of making excuses. Please help me in stopping the excuses that a gun killed anybody. Eventually, we all have to accept full and total responsibility for our actions, everything we have done and have not done. Stephen Covey says, look at the word responsibility. Response. Ability. The ability to choose your response. Highly proactive people recognize that responsibility. They do not blame circumstances, conditions, or conditioning for their behavior. Their behavior is a product of their own conscious choice, based on values rather than a product of their conditions, based on feelings. Was that too deep? How about this last one from George Washington Carver, where he says that 99% of all failures come from people who have a habit of making excuses. I think you got where I'm coming from. This is your friend and brother Ken Blanchard. And just in case nobody has told you this today, I love you. And it's not a damn thing you can do about it. Until next week. Shalom, baby.
Until next time, friends.
To keep in touch with Ken and his cause, head over to blackmanwithagun.com.
Blanchard.media